Spartans! What is your profession?
See, old friend, I brought more soldiers than you did.
In 480 BC, the king of Persia invaded Greece. As the ruler of a vast empire, Xerxes brought with him the greatest army Greece had ever seen, and for 4 months this massive force rolled south through the country unopposed. City after city surrendered. But Xerxes' campaign came to a juddering stop when his army reached the pass of Thermopylae in central Greece, where he found a Greek army waiting, led by the Spartan king Leonidas. The battle that followed has gone down in history as the mother of all last stands. The Persian army arrived at the pass in late August or early September. The vastly outnumbered Greeks held them off for 7 days, including 3 of battle, before the rear guard was annihilated in one of history's most famous last stands. During 2 full days of battle, the small force led by Leonidas blocked the only road by which the massive Persian army could pass. After the 2nd day, a local resident named Ephialtes betrayed the Greeks by revealing a small path used by shepherds. It led the Persians behind the Greek lines. Leonidas, aware that his force was being outflanked, dismissed the bulk of the Greek army and remained to guard their retreat with 300 Spartans and 700 Thespians. It has been reported that others also remained, including up to 900 Helots and 400 Thebans. With the exception of the Thebans, most of whom reportedly surrendered, the Greeks fought to the death. When Leonidas learned of the encirclement early on the 3rd day, he called a meeting. They still had time to withdraw, but Leonidas and what was left of his 300 Spartans insisted on staying. So, too, did the contingent of 700 from the ancient Greek city of Thespiae. Since their city in the nearby region of Boeotia was in the path of any Persian advance, they had good reason to lay down their lives. 400 Thebans also stayed, only to the desert at the end. The rest of the Greek force chose to leave. The historian Herodotus, keen to lionize Leonidas, tells us that the leader sent the allies away to spare their lives and win immortal glory. Although neither motive can be dismissed, it's likely that the main reason was strategic. The Persians, unlike the Greeks, had cavalry, which could overtake and destroy the retreating forces. To buy time for the retreating troops, Leonidas needed a rear guard to hold back the Persians, and die, if necessary. The rear guard held their own, despite losing their commander Leonidas amidst brutal, drawn-out fighting. But then the Immortals arrived, and the Greeks had to retreat to a low hill. The vicious hand-to-hand fighting had broken their spears and swords, but they fought on with daggers, hands, and teeth until the Persians tired of unnecessary losses and shot them down with arrow volleys. Arrowheads of Anatolian design have been found in large numbers on the hill by modern archaeologists. Thermopylae was a Greek defeat. The rear guard was annihilated and the Persians rolled on to occupy central Greece. But Thermopylae did, crucially, prove that the Persian war machine could be stopped. It also tested the Greek strategy of using confined space to neutralize Persian numbers, a strategy that later proved devastatingly effective when the Greeks destroyed the Persian fleet in the narrow Strait of Salamis just a month or so later. Win or lose, the battle achieved mythic status almost at once, like the British retreat at Dunkirk in 1940, or the massacre of the defenders at the Alamo Mission in Texas in 1836. And it became Sparta's myth. The 300 Spartans were a minority of the defending force, not just in the army but even in the last stand, but the clash became the Battle of the Spartan 300, not the Greek 7,000, in the popular imagination. It also served to polish Sparta's already formidable reputation for invincibility. In the 5th century BC, Herodotus recounts how Xerxes, before Thermopylae, asked the exiled Spartan king Damaratus how free Greeks could stand against him without being forced to fight under the lash. Damaratus replied that the Spartans, though free, have a master whom they fear more than the Persians, their king and the law, which tells them not to retreat but to stand and die. This wasn't strictly true, the Spartans knew how to retreat. It was Thermopylae that created the myth that Spartans always win or die. Equally useful for Sparta's image were stories of Spartans who made the mistake of surviving. One such story is that of Aristodemus, who was one of 2 Spartans invalided out of the battle due to an eye infection. His comrade, Eurytus, was blinded, but he returned to the battle to fight and die. Aristodemus, meanwhile, went home. He was ostracized and his life was made so unbearable that he preferred to die as a berserker fighting against the Persians a year later. The Spartans still refused to forgive him, even then. The message was clear: no second chances in Sparta. Most strikingly, later sources present the whole campaign as a suicide expedition, having Leonidas tell the authorities at Sparta before the battle that his real goal is to die for Greece. But 7,000 seems a large force to send out just to die for no strategic goal. And the story works only for the 300 Spartans, not the 6,000 plus allies. Certainly, those who left on the 3rd day did not think they had joined a suicide squad. The story reflects the tendency we all have to read history backward and see the outcome as both inevitable and predictable. It usually isn't. Thermopylae also generated proliferating stories of Spartan courage under fire, always tied to the Spartan reputation as men of deeds, not words. The Spartan soldier Dionysus, when told that the Persian arrows would blot out the sun, is said to have replied calmly, "Good news, we'll be fighting in the shade." A later story adds to this reputation. When the Persians demanded that the Spartans hand over their weapons, Leonidas answered, "Come and get them," words now inscribed on his statues in Sparta and at Thermopylae.